I was really surprised and interested to see this headline yesterday. It says Supreme Court sides with Catholic foster agency that excludes same-sex couples in 9-0 ruling. What really surprised me, and I showed it to my wife, and she was pretty struck by this too, is that it was a unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court in favor of this Catholic foster agency. What's interesting is that earlier this year I was reporting on Bethany Christian Services, another foster agency that actually made a change in their policy that they were going to be inclusive of LGBTQ couples. But in this case, this foster agency in Philadelphia is not being inclusive, and the court actually upheld their prerogative. It says here in a 9-0 ruling, the justices sided with Catholic Social Services. CSS seeks only an accommodation that will allow it to continue serving the children of Philadelphia in a manner consistent with its religious beliefs. It does not seek to impose those beliefs on anyone else, Chief Justice John Roberts wrote in a majority opinion. The refusal of Philadelphia to contract with CSS for the provision of foster care services, unless it agrees to certify same-sex couples as foster parents, cannot survive strict scrutiny and violates the First Amendment. So I think from a lot of people's perspective, if they are Christians, they see this as a really good thing. Basically, the court upholding First Amendment protections, but also talking about how in this instance, the way that the city was operating does not hold up to scrutiny. And another article here from USA Today gives this information. It says, in an opinion written by Chief Justice John Roberts on Thursday, the court held that Philadelphia had allowed exemptions to its non-discrimination policy in other contexts. Because of that, the court concluded the policy was not applied equally to religious and secular entities, and that ultimately meant that the city's non-discrimination rule could not withstand the court's highest level of constitutional scrutiny. So one of the things being brought out here is that the court sees that the city is allowing exemptions to its policy in certain areas or from certain groups, but then they're not allowing an exemption to this Catholic foster agency. And so actually the city is discriminating in the way that it is handling the situation, I think is basically what the Supreme Court is saying. So this was interesting because the court looked at this in such a way that all nine of the justices actually sided with the Catholic foster care agency. And that really made a lot of people angry, people on the other side. Another Fox News article says that unanimous Supreme Court decision favoring religious freedom sparks backlash from the left. A segment of Democrats have been pushing for President Biden to have the ability to expand the roster of the Supreme Court and pack it with liberal justices. But Thursday's 9-0 ruling in favor of a religious foster care agency that would not work with LGBT couples is leaving some on the left disappointed with the entire court. So there have been people who have said that they think that President Biden should expand the roster of the court so that there will be more justices, and the idea is that's going to balance it out. But the premise there is that if you have more liberal justices, it's going to change the ruling, it's going to influence the ruling. But in this case, even with the more liberal justices that are on the court, it was still a 9-0 ruling in favor of what's considered a conservative position. And so that's really deflating, I think, to people on the left. And there was backlash, as it talks about here, people commenting on social media. One person said, "Can anyone give me any valid reason why Kagan, Breyer, and Sotomayor would rule for the Catholic foster care agency?" one Twitter user questioned. Another one said, "Interesting. All the liberal justices on the Supreme Court voted in favor of the right of a Catholic social services organization to discriminate against gay people," another observed. So people are really complaining here, not so much with what the conservative justices ruled. I think they were expecting that. What they're really ticked off about is that even the more liberal justices actually sided in favor of the Catholic foster care agency. So it's interesting. Nancy Pelosi, in this article at the end here, does give her spin on things, and it says that Nancy Pelosi said, today's unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court made clear discrimination has no place in our foster and adoption systems or anywhere in our democracy, Pelosi said in a statement. While the decision was not a sweeping victory, Americans are proud that the court affirmed that LGBTQ couples have a right to welcome children in our foster care system into their families. So the court, from what I understand here, wasn't saying that in general LGBTQ families can't have foster care children. What it's saying, though, is that in this particular instance, there was really discrimination against this foster care agency, and that the agency wasn't pushing its beliefs on others. It was just trying to carry out its services according to its own beliefs, but that others in that same city, Philadelphia, other agencies could carry out their practices according to their beliefs. So at the end of the day, the Supreme Court isn't really like taking a stand against LGBTQ. They're just trying to make sure that the city is applying its policies fairly to all agencies. That being said, I think what is good news is that it is a 9-0 decision, and it actually is protecting religious prerogative in this case. So I think that is definitely good news. And again, it's such a contrast to what we saw earlier this year with Bethany Christian Services. And I talked in that video how we can see certain aspects or levels of persecution, and there's a sense of pressure that foster care organizations probably feel. But in this case, the Catholic agency stood their ground, and the court actually sided with them and protected their freedoms, their religious freedoms. I know that people have very strong opinions about these things, but I think the court did make a very good point that this isn't a foster care agency trying to push its beliefs on others. That's how the court looks at it. The court says that they're just operating according to their own beliefs, carrying out their practices according to their own standards, and then other agencies can carry out according to whatever standards they have. So in my opinion, it's a very fair, reasonable ruling. And I think the fact that it was 9-0 shows that this, at least from the Supreme Court perspective, was not motivated by political conservatism. The court really sees this just as an issue of applying a policy fairly and consistently across the board in the case of Philadelphia here. I would love to hear what you think about all of this in the comments below. Try to keep those comments constructive and helpful to discussion. But thank you so much for taking some time to listen to some of my thoughts on this topic, brought to you from A Frisch Perspective.